Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Wednesday, November 25th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Illinois game is in 3 days, and the game against Michigan is in 17 days. The first college football playoff rankings of the season came out last night, and Ohio State opens in the number 4 spot. Alabama ranked first, followed by number 2 Notre Dame, number 3 Clemson, and the Buckeyes in the top 4. Texas A&M and Florida 5th and 6th, Cincinnati 7th, Northwestern 8th. What a time to be alive. Georgia number 9 and Miami 10. Buckeye Scoop reporter Tony Gerdeman is my guest this morning. And Tony, in a year in which so much feels bizarre, unfamiliar, and just plain wrong, it is a true blessing to see 4 SEC teams ranked in the top 9, including a Georgia team with 2 losses and close, terrible wins over teams like Mississippi State and Kentucky.
We call that normalcy, Paul. And nature is returning. Is that the right phrase as well for, the SEC doing what the committee loves to do every year? And it's maybe this is their version of putting the decorations on the tree. Put a little Georgia here, Texas A&M. Do we need LSU this year? No. We leave LSU in the garage, but what about can you give us a little I don't know, Auburn? Yeah, we can give you some Auburn. And then what do you put on the top of the tree? Same thing every year. The Alabama Star.
Roll Tide. Yes, Gary Barta, the playoff committee chairman, on the media conference call that immediately followed the TV show, said that Georgia was in the top 10 because they had a quality win over Auburn and quality losses against Alabama and Florida. And as our good buddy Marcus Hartman of the Dayton Daily News said, the committee is impressed Georgia only lost 2 of its 3 games against good teams this season. I mean, he's not wrong. So that's enough about Georgia. That's more than enough about Georgia, in fact. So let's talk about Ohio State. That is probably what people are here for. What was the committee's case for and against the Buckeyes this year to put them in the number 4 spot in those first rankings?
Well, what they said was Ohio State has a very explosive offense. That's why they're number 4, and that's why they're up there. The reason they're not higher, though, was because the teams aside from the team they've beaten that is ranked number 12, Indiana. When you look at the other teams they have beaten, the collective record is like 2-12 or 3-12. Gary Barta said whatever it was, and so that's why they didn't feel that they deserved to be any higher. But you know what? As long as they keep winning, they'll continue to be monitored. And then also the almost cryptic thing where Barta says, we're going to keep watching that defense. It's like, well, does that mean if they keep playing poorly that you'll drop Ohio State behind Texas A&M, Florida? Is this a thing where you're watching them to see if you can move Ohio State up past a team with a loss? Or are you watching the defense to see if you're going to move them down behind a team with a loss? Because, Tom, as far as I know, as long as they keep winning, they're going to make the playoffs. But when, if they're moving Ohio State around while they're undefeated and moving them out of the playoff hunt right now, even though it is still early, that would not be a good sign.
Well, I think this is a good time for my standard disclaimer that the committee does not seem particularly beholden to keep any kind of consistent logic from week to week or team to team. And this is just really not something that's worth getting particularly angry about because the thinking will all be different next week. So don't get your blood pressure up when you're watching the TV show. This is really just ESPN needing to fill an hour of time on a Tuesday night in the fall. That's what this is all about. We will probably not do this show every week because honestly, this is kind of pointless a lot of weeks because no matter what they say this week, a lot of times what they say next week will be completely different, and the rationale will be completely different. But I mean, what was your favorite example of that on Tuesday night? There were a few. There was I liked the explanation that Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns, their win over Iowa State, who was ranked 13th, I think, didn't really matter because it was early. But and there's been a lot of more recent games that were more valuable. But Clemson, which looked dominant early and has looked terrible in 3 straight weeks, they were ranked number 3rd because of the consistent dominance. But did the early games not matter, or do they matter? Because it seems like that's 2 different points you're making there.
Well, in the Oklahoma example where Barta said they really liked what they've done the last 5 games, and they've really looked good the last 5 games. And they also mentioned, and now Spencer Rattler is looking like everybody thought he would at the start of the season, so that's also good. And yeah, that's fine, but should they be ahead of Indiana? Should they be ahead of BYU? This is an Oklahoma program that we are used to not being worthy of discussion in terms of the playoffs. And sure, maybe this is their perfect spot. But when you're like, oh, you're just looking at what happened latest. And as you said, well, what happened earliest doesn't matter. That just depends on which team they're talking about. And that's why, no, we should not get angry at this stuff. That's why I get angry, reasonably, not really angry, but internet angry, which can sometimes be supremely angry. For this team, we're going to use this logic. For this team, we're going to use this line of thinking. And this team, we're going to do something else. That way, I can massage all of this to put the rankings in the order that I think they should be in. And you just use whatever data you think suits you best to put the order of teams in the order that you wanted them to begin with.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at some of the metrics they've talked about in previous years, like game control. Barta was asked specifically about game control on the conference call with the media, and basically said, yeah, we're not really looking at that. We're just kind of looking, we're watching the games, and we're just really want to watch the games. So it just basically mentally append the words eye test to everything, and that pretty much explains it. On the TV show, Gary Barta, who again is the AD of Iowa, he's the committee chairman this year, he said one reason Clemson was ranked ahead of Ohio State was the fact that the Tigers had been dominating in all of their games outside of the Notre Dame loss. And then he, I think everyone kind of went, what? Even our buddy Matt Connolly, who is a Clemson beat writer, said, like, look, I'm fine with Clemson being ranked third, but that's just not true. And then Barta said that again on the conference call with the media after the show was over. So you look at their games, and they had a 27-21 lead on Syracuse in the third quarter, and Syracuse is one of the worst teams in FBS. They had a 28-10 second quarter deficit against Boston College, and then that Notre Dame loss. And that's their last 3 games. And remember when your most recent games mattered a lot with Oklahoma? The prestige.
So, and that whole thing because you tweeted out the lack of dominance, and you go back to that first half against Boston College, and then maybe they only looked at the second half, and then you compare that with the second half of Ohio State. That's why, I quote tweeted you, like, maybe they only look at the second half of games. Maybe that's all they're really focused on, because who needs game control? Maybe they're watching this like people watch the NBA. I only need to see the last 2 minutes.
I mean, it's just, this is one of the things, again, this is not worth getting upset about, because it doesn't matter if Ohio State wins out, they're going to be fine. They'll be in the playoff. And once you get in the playoff, you get in the playoff. It's worth just, I always find it a little amusing to just try and apply the logic from one team to another. A few other teams to note. There were a couple other interesting things that were I think worth taking a look at. Cincinnati, number 7 right now, and number 7, that's like, BYU got buried at number 14, and we'll talk about them in a minute. But Cincinnati at number 7 was like, yeah, that's about where they belong, probably. Do you think there's a legitimate path for them if they run the table?
Well, and you have to look, how do they bypass the teams in front of them? And then they have Northwestern right behind them. So Northwestern would need to lose and then beat Ohio State. And maybe then Ohio State drops out completely of the playoff talk. And if Clemson loses to Notre Dame again, then they're out. And can, Texas A&M and Florida and Alabama, they've got to all work themselves out. So I think there is a way, unless Tom, the committee's like, no, it's not what we want. It's going to be Alabama, Clemson. Let's try to figure out a way to get Georgia in there. And they're already having Georgia at 9. You watch them, and Florida, Texas A&M. Yes, Tom, 5 SEC teams in the college football playoffs this year. It's a virtual lock right now.
That is the dream. And yeah, you find yourself thinking, oh, maybe they could do it if Alabama really blows out Florida and knocks them out, and Notre Dame either Notre Dame beats Clemson a second time, or Clemson really annihilates Notre Dame in the ACC championship game, or Notre Dame loses to North Carolina this week, for example. I mean, there's a bunch of ways it could happen, and you know, someone gets Texas A&M, and like it could happen. And then you look at how they're handling BYU, and it's like, oh right, they just absolutely hate everyone who's not a Power 5 team. That's right, I forgot. BYU is 14th. They have just completely annihilated everyone they've played this year outside of one game, and they won that one too. Their best win was on the road at Boise State. They killed Boise State. Boise State had some COVID issues, but like, what is BYU supposed to do about that? And you know, and Barta just kind of went, well, you know, Boise State was down to its third quarterback, so you know, and then outside of that, they haven't really done much because I haven't really played anyone. And it's like, but what is their path? They have killed everyone on their schedule. They're an independent. It's not like they have a league schedule. Like they're playing the teams they can play. They probably didn't do themselves any favors earlier this week by, you know, not immediately jumping on the potential to play at Washington. That probably didn't do them any favors, but you know, it does seem like, oh, okay, I see. There's absolutely nothing they could do that could possibly get them anywhere close to any actual consideration.
My question for you is, like, say of the four teams ahead of them, Miami, Oklahoma, Indiana, Iowa State, would you expect BYU to beat those four, any of those four, all of those four on a neutral field, or say on the road at Michigan?
I would say, I mean, yeah, let's see. Right ahead of them is Iowa State, Indiana, Oklahoma, Miami. Like, yeah, I mean, put them on a neutral field. I think they would go at least 2-2 against the four teams directly ahead of them. At least, you know, and that's, you know, that's you know, purely speculative, but you know,
as opposed to,
well, if you're gonna include these teams, if this is like as a thought exercise, you're going to include these teams in your rankings, like you have to actually give them a shot, because I think they would probably have a decent chance to you know, beat some of those teams ahead of them, and you know, they would have a puncher's chance against. I mean, are you what is the likelihood that BYU could beat Ohio State this year? Like BYU can wing that ball around, and yeah, they're going to give up a whole bunch of points, but you know, that's a game that could end up in the, you know, with the losing team in the high 30s, low 40s, and at that point, like, yeah, I mean, it could happen. Are they that much less qualified than, you know, any of the multitude of Oklahoma teams that have gotten in recently? Like, I don't really think so.
No, I'm with you on that. And the Indiana, that just feels like they don't really think Indiana is that good. First of all, they should maybe have them higher, but even having them at 12, it's like, yeah, they don't really count. And they don't count as a quality win for Ohio State, it feels like. And when you're talking about the subjectiveness and the thought exercise, because in my opinion, you look at the top four, where you just look at Clemson and Ohio State, and they think, well, who would you favor in that game? And they would favor Clemson. But who would you favor in Ohio State, Notre Dame? Maybe Ohio State, but Notre Dame already beat Clemson, so there's a specific order to these things. And I'll tell you, when I wrote this up, I was writing it up before it was released. I had Ohio State third because that's just the order of things. When you are an undefeated team, when you're an undefeated Power 5 Ohio State team, you don't really have a team that has one loss ahead of you from a conference that isn't the SEC. And so I had to do a little bit of editing, and I thankfully I caught it, you know, as I'm, you know, sometimes do, but I had to change things up because I was totally expecting Ohio State to be third. There were odds that Ohio State was going to be second as recently as a few days ago, at which I didn't buy into that one, but I was definitely surprised to see them ranked number 4, although I got less surprised watching the ESPN, watching Reese Davis say, and in order for us to make this more dramatic or whatever, we're going to release them this way. And then it's like, well, why do you need drama in the top 4? And then it started to click that this might be happening.
Yeah. And I mean, you look at teams who were undefeated in the past who got bumped down the rankings. That always reminds me of 2014 Florida State, the year after the national championship with Jameis. They just looked like butt all year. They beat Oklahoma State unranked by 6 points. They beat Clemson, who was not capital C Clemson back then, by 6 points. They beat Notre Dame at home by 4. beat Miami, who was unranked by 4, beat Boston College, who was unranked by 3, beat Florida, who was unranked by 5, beat Georgia Tech by 2 in the ACC championship game. Like it was like they were just barely scraping by. Ohio State's not barely scraping by. Ohio State was killing teams, and you look at the halftime score, you look at the early third quarter, it's like all of these games are over. And, Ohio State picked a very bad time to have a very bad half of football on Saturday, it sounds like, but it does not. None of this seems like something that is worth Ohio State fans losing any sleep over, because it doesn't. If they keep winning, they'll be just fine. One thing that's interesting is Northwestern is number 8 now. That's interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, if Northwestern keeps winning, Northwestern could be like 5th going into the Big Ten championship game if they really do keep winning. I mean, you have some teams ahead of them lose. Indiana 12, as you mentioned, like. If Indiana beats Wisconsin, like those could actually be a couple legitimately quality wins for Ohio State if things, if those teams keep winning and Ohio State keeps handling its own business and gets the defense sorted out. I mean, there is still, I think, if Alabama loses, it sounds like Alabama is a dominant absolute number 1 with a bullet right now. If Alabama loses, if Notre Dame loses, I think it seems like there is a clear path for Ohio State to be number 1 if those two things happen.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And you're looking to see how, are you trying to avoid Alabama in the first round? Like, are you trying to maneuver things, or when you're imagining this? Because right now, do you think Ohio State ends up 4? Because they can't, because Notre Dame and Clemson are going to work each other out. And so then there's no difference between 2 or 3, unless you're talking about venue, whether you're playing out west or in the southeast. And yeah, I think they can get to number 1, but expecting an Alabama loss at this point is, maybe Florida gets them, but does Florida move up to number 1?
Yeah, I mean it's certainly possible. Yeah, and again, this is we're projecting things a month out at this point, and not with the idea that we don't know exactly what's going to happen in any of this, and how many of these games are actually going to get played, and how is the committee going to value any of these things. I mean, these are all questions. There are more questions than in a normal year, and this far out, there's always questions in a normal year. So one thing that I do want, for people who have not listened to us discuss the college football playoff before, who may not have been listening to Buckeye Weekly this time last year, may not have been familiar with our work before we joined Buckeye Scoop, I would like you to please explain how you can tell what the committee really wants to do at the top of the rankings by what they are doing at the bottom of the rankings.
You can always tell. They love to talk about quality wins, and they got this win over a ranked team. And knowing, you just look at Auburn at 22, 5-2. The fact that they're 5-2 and ranked that low tells you that the committee does not like them, but they needed them in the rankings to help boost other teams. And there's always that where it's just, why are you there? What is your purpose? They can move up, they can move down. But even Auburn, with a loss now, is when they lose this week, will they drop out, or will they just drop to 25? And then will they be back up with wins? Because, hey, their only losses have been to the 3, top 3 teams or whatever in the SEC. And it's just, I don't know. It's the curtain has been revealed from the wizard, basically.
Yeah. And I think the genesis of this theory was, it might have been an Auburn team. There was an SEC team that lost by like 3 touchdowns, and I think might have dropped from like 12th to 13th or something. And it was like, but did you see their game? Like, you talk all the time about how many games you watch. Did you see the game where they lost? But no, you didn't resonate. No. Okay. Well,
Georgia.
Yeah. And yes. Yeah. And Georgia may very well be this year's example of that. So yeah, there's still plenty of football to watch, plenty of football to enjoy, and don't spend too much time worrying about this. Like I said, we will probably not do this show every single week. I just wanted to do it this week, just since it's the first one. So We also a little later on today we dropped an episode of Buckeye Weekly last night on our on your podcast feed, and we have another one coming out this morning, previewing some of this week's games. Figure we drop both of our shows very early this week because I know people are traveling and people are just kind of sitting around at home, and figure we'll let you listen to those at your leisure. And Tony, I'm not sure if you saw this, but after the time that we hit stop, already some of the games we discussed have been canceled. No Wisconsin, Minnesota this week, among other things, but should be still plenty of good football this week. Which game are you most excited to watch this week?
It sounds disturbing to say it, but maybe Michigan, Penn State. I'm not proud of it. I'm not a proud person. I'm not but Michigan is just really interesting to me right now, where you don't know what you're going to get, and it might be horrific. It might be hilarious. It's going to be somewhere in there. It's like, the really good horror comedies are really fun to watch, and they're rewatchable. Michigan is just rewatchable this year to me.
Yes, Michigan is Scream. Penn State might be Saw this year. I mean, they're kind of all over that genre, but yeah, it's that's up there. I feel like this is the year that we have all just turned into the sickos meme, like just looking through the window, just can't wait to see Michigan Rutgers and can't wait to see Michigan Penn State. It is just.
I'm also really looking forward to Michigan Maryland, but that's just me next week.
All right, now you've gone too far. All right, well, Tony, thank you for joining us. We have, like I said, we have another episode of Buckeye Weekly dropping a little bit later on Wednesday morning for you. So you have plenty of great stuff to listen to. If you want to, if you're on a drive to a relative's house or just sitting at home and just want to drown out the voices around you. If the political talk gets a little loud at the dinner table, throw in your butt in and listen to us shoot the breeze about this weekend's football games instead. You're welcome. So we will not have a Morning Scoop podcast tomorrow for Thanksgiving. Figure we're going to give you guys one day off. We'll be back on Friday to look ahead at the week ahead probably, but that will do it for today. Make sure you check out all of our great content at buckeyescoop.com. Lots of interesting stuff on this weekend's Ohio State-Illinois game. Lots and lots and lots of content on, so what's the deal with the Ohio State pass defense and how can they fix it? And can they fix it quickly? And lots of stuff like that from a very talented and insightful group of writers. That's all at buckeyescoop.com. When you are sitting at that Thanksgiving table and someone asks, what do you want for Christmas? You should tell them a membership to buckeyescoop.com. That is the gift. It is like the Jelly of the Month Club. It is the gift that keeps giving the whole year round. You can sign up at buckeyescoop.com. And we have memberships available monthly and on an annual basis. Again, this is, we're like a little over 2 weeks from the Michigan game, Big Ten championship game 3 weeks away, college football playoff selection show the day after that. And, we're just just a little over a month away from the college football playoff semifinals. It is getting here. It is a great time to be a member of Buckeye Scoop. Done a lot of recruiting news this week, too. If you were interested in the future of Ohio State football and the shovel and pailfuls of 5-stars that they keep throwing on the heap, this is a great time to be a member of BuckeyeScoop.com. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great Thanksgiving. We will talk to you Friday.